Hello there, algebra students. This is Mr. Kashi speaking. With this video, we're going to go through 11.4, day 1, which is on the zero product property. And we're also going to go through the square root property first here. And so what we're basically doing today is solving square root problems and zero product property problems. So over here at the right is what we'll call the square root property. And it's pretty straightforward, but there's just a little bit to it that you want to make sure that you know when you're solving these equations. So if we had x squared equals 4, what I want you to do is I want you to think about what we could plug in for x to make this true. Well, I think a lot of people see the obvious answer of 2. 2 times 2, well, that would equal 4. That's pretty easy, but what a lot of people don't think about is the negative side of things. So this is negative 2 times negative 2 would also give us a positive 4. So in this case, x would equal 2 or negative 2. And so we're going to be using that square root property quite a bit throughout chapter 11 here. So we want to make sure that we use that same property for these examples over here on the left. So we have x squared equals 49. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. We get x equals, now we have the positive 7, the square root of 49 is positive 7, but we also have a negative 7, because negative 7 squared would be 49 as well. Same thing down here with r squared equals 144. If I were to take the square root of both sides, I would get r equals, I'd get positive 12, and I would also get negative 12, like that. So this is an important property, pretty simple, just remembering that there's a second answer there when we're talking about squaring our variables. So moving on to this example, what we want to do is we have x minus 3, that whole quantity squared equals 64, and we want to solve for x. So to get rid of that squared, the opposite of that would be taking the square root of both sides. So we'd get x minus 3 equals the square root of 64. We have a plus and we have a minus 8. So we do this little symbol here for the positive and the negative 8. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add 3 on both sides. So we get x equals positive or negative 8 plus 3. So that seems a little weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually split that up. We're going to have x equals a positive 8 plus 3 and x equals a negative 8 plus 3. And then just the simple arithmetic there, we have x equals 11 and x equals negative 5. Now, we have two answers there, x equals 11 and x equals negative 5. I'm not going to do this every time, but I want to come up and show you how this works. So here, if we were to plug 11 back in, so we have 11 minus 3, that would be 8. 8 squared is 64, so that we know that that works. And then if we were to plug in our other answer, we have negative 5 minus 3 squared. Well, negative 5 minus 3, that's a negative 8. Negative 8 squared, that'd be a positive 64. And that means that that works too. So both of these answers work, which is, and we'll get into what these answers actually represent when it comes to a parabola in a later lesson, but here we're just solving for x in these equations. So here we have what we call the zero product property. And what the zero product property is if a times b equals 0, then a equals 0 or b equals 0. So in this case, obviously, one of them has to be 0 if you're multiplying, or both of them could be 0. 0 times 0 is equal to 0. So we have to find that both of them are equal to 0. So what we have to do is, once again, we have to split these up. We have to assume that they're both equal to 0. So here, think of this as a times b equals 0. So here we would have x plus 5 equals 0, and we have x minus 2 equals 0. So we've split this up into our two different answers. We're going to subtract 5 on both sides. We get x equals negative 5. On here, we're going to add 2 on both sides. X equals 2. So we have our two solutions here. If 2 were to be plugged in for x, as you can see right here, 2 minus 2, that would make it 0. And if we were to plug in negative 5 over here, negative 5 plus 5, that would be 0. So either of these answers would work to solve this equation. Then we got one more example, a little bit more involved here. So remember, we're going to split this up. So we have 2y minus 5 equals 0, and we have 3y plus 7 equals 0. And so here we just want to solve for y, and so we have plus 5, so we have 2y equals 5, and then we're going to divide by 2. So divide by 2, y equals, in this case, you could either leave it as 5/2, or you could put it as 2.5. I believe in your assignment in Alex, it's going to want a fraction for that. And then, so you have one answer there, y equals 2.5, or 5/2. And then on the other side, we're going to subtract 7. We have 3y equals negative 7. And divide by 3, y equals, I would leave this one as just negative 7/3. Just like that. So you have two answers, you have 5/2, and then you have negative 7/3. And it's not really as important. I mean, you could use a calculator to do negative 7 divided by 3 to find what your decimal is. But right here, I believe they'll just have you enter your answers as fractions. So that's the zero product property, and that is something that we're going to build off of with our next video. So hopefully these examples helped, and we will be available for any help that you need down the road.